Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Samir Abu Ghosh from Ontario Consulting, and today's webinar is titled Beyond the Sticky Notes, Key Considerations for Applying Design Thinking. Well, I believe we all love the colorful workshops. I personally love sticky notes. I feel good around them. I use them at home. But today we are diving into how to ensure that those sticky notes translate into real world innovation, how to make sure we have impactful design thinking activities. Joining me are three great minds in the innovation space. We have Ziad, a business agility and innovation specialist. Next is Nick, our UX expert from IBM. And finally, Dom, technology leader from John Hancock from the great city of Boston. Welcome, gentlemen.
You see people doing design thinking and you're thinking, okay, it seems like an act. What are they achieving? What's the real value? And I feel that there was always another layer that sometimes get ignored in these workshops. So I would love to start with Nick, since you're expert in design thinking, to tell me, okay, what's the main pitfalls that you see people fall into when applying design thinking?
I was teaching design thinking to our new hires yesterday, and it's really about immersion into it, so that you can really, and that's when you bring your CEOs and your CIOs into the workshops to really get them to embrace it and understand how powerful it is. But, as you said, I think even though we can get our leadership to understand the power of all this, there's still a lot of, we use the phrase, innovation theater. You get a lot of important people into a room and you run a wonderful workshop, but it looks impressive. But at the end of the day, and it's energizing, but if at the end of the day, if you don't convert it into something that's useful, then it's not worth it. In fact, we've embraced design thinking at IBM for more than 10 years, and within consulting a bit longer than that in our software. And we found we would run these workshops with our leadership and nothing would come of it. And it got to the point, it's like, we're not just going to do this for you anymore. And we made t-shirts that says, design thinking isn't just a swear word workshop. You have to do more than that. So, it's about how do you convert the sale? How do you turn these amazing insights and outcomes and co-creation that you get from all the right people into the room, way more than you would get from 10 interviews, into something that's useful. So whether that's a mission statement or a vision, a set of prioritized capabilities that you can turn into a roadmap or a backlog, though you have to don't just make it theater. You have to have an outcome that you want to deliver against and align your work products to those outcomes so that you can drive to success after that.
And it's keep your eye on the prize, and not being able to, in essence, deliver or get to your outcome it can be detrimental. So you have all this great energy, this great work, this big investment, not only with your personnel, and you spend some money, but if you don't get that value, that prize or that objective, then you haven't quite got there. So Nick, no, well said. And I like that you shared your experience from IBM, who of course is an industry leader when we think about design thinking.
To be successful, you really need to plan well. And that means, having a goal for your outcome, but also, preparing very well. We talked a lot about design prompts. You have to have, when we prepare for senior leadership workshops with our clients, we'll spend literally weeks just working on the design prompt to make sure it's accurate, make sure it's not too broad so that you can't get to a good outcome, make sure it's not too narrow so that you're biasing the direction that you're going to go into. But, driving toward those outcomes and your preparation are super, super important. And what design thinking does for you is it brings you, at its core, a focus on the user. And it reminds you on a daily basis and on an hourly basis that you have to focus on the user and having critical empathy for the person who's going to use your product or use your process or interact with you on a call center or in a storefront. So critical empathy is something that is super, super important. So, what are the things that we need to think about when it comes to that? It's, one, having a good understanding of a user means that you need to understand that they're going to have their own internal conflicts. The classic empathy map where, the saying, feeling, doing, thinking, that user might be saying, I really love to shop at this place, but in the back of their mind is like, I really hate shopping here because the lineups are too long and the people aren't friendly to me. So understanding that those conflicts are going to exist and diving deep into how they feel about it is really important. It also starts to align to, every interaction has two sides to that coin. So it's not just about critical empathy for your end user, but it's also, or your client, it's also critical empathy for the people who are interacting with that person. So if you have a client at a store, you have to have deep empathy for them, but you also, from a service design perspective, have a deep empathy for that service delivery person or employee. So, diving deep into that type of interaction can be really powerful and give you insights on how you design your user experience. So, further than that, don't just trust what people say. If you can ask all the questions that you want, and sometimes that client is just going to tell you, or that user is just going to tell you what they think you want to hear, rather than actually what they're thinking or doing. So, getting out into the field, doing contextual inquiry, watching someone interact with that old green screen system, that is really important to dive deep. And further to that, don't just trust the project managers that I've been doing this for 15 years. I know everything about our users. Don't trust them. You have to get out there so that you can have critical and deep empathy for your end user.
If I may ask a question, when it comes to design thinking, we know we have the standard process. From your experience, how loyal should we be to the process?
But you need to adjust. For instance, if you're looking at an interaction that isn't linear, then you need to adjust the exercises that you're doing. Instead of a current state map, then maybe you're doing some sort of need statements, and you have to be flexible within that. Further to that, you can take out parts of design thinking and apply it as needed. So, for instance, we used to, before doing a quarterly business report in front of a CIO of a very large customer, we would all spend 20 minutes and do an empathy map on that person.
Like in my mind, it's like this is the difference between looking innovative and actually being innovative, right? And we need always to keep an eye out for the red flags. We need to spot the red flags. Almost always there is an like sort of overemphasis on the process over the outcome. While this should be the opposite, right? That's why we need to make sure not to end up with the death by process trap.
When we focus too much on process and we're not balancing, and my comments earlier about taking our eye off the prize and not remembering or keeping that focus on the outcome, we get stuck in this trap and we're spending too much time, too much focus on the process. And again, at the end of the day, we need to deliver the value, the outcome, the goal, the objective that we set out to deliver in the first place. So I think what I would encourage people to do is use process to the point where you need to. And if you need to skip some of it or maybe tweak it or kind of blend it to adapt, do it. Empower yourselves. Don't focus there, but make sure that you leverage the process and you focus on the outcome and find that balance and act. It's a great point. And design thinking does work for both that disruptive and also that incremental process. So let me raise very high level, right? Disruptive is what? It's when you're creating a new product or service and you're looking to disrupt change in industry. An example would be Airbnb. They turned the hotel industry upside down. Netflix also, they in essence made DVDs obsolete. and they completely change the way we view TV, movies, so on and so forth. Incremental is when you have an existing product or service and you're looking to make it better. A Coca-Cola, when they come out with a new flavor of their soft drink, so they've come out with a cherry or a vanilla, is an incremental change to an existing product. Going back to Netflix, what's interesting about their story is that they're also used the incremental part of it as well too. So your profile Netflix, if you go back, let's say 24 months, wasn't as good as it is today. So they continue to make incremental improvements to their existing profile. So I see the movies, the TV programs that I may like, and it makes those recommendations for me. The point is that design thinking is effective for both incremental and also disruptive. Very valuable.
I like the story of Netflix. It's one of my favorite case studies when it comes to disruptive innovation, because the way I look at it, like they did what some call self-disruption, right? Like we often talk about how design thinking helps you overthrow a competitor.
Very, very interesting concept. But based on your experience, how do you see design thinking work with other tools and methodologies that we're using in our product delivery lifecycle? Um, the thing that came to mind is to my mind is when I see how design thinking is a perfect pair with agile.
You know, when I look back, and it ties back to that innovation theater, and when we first started doing design thinking workshops, you know, as early as 10 years ago, that there was a lot of excitement and innovation that came out of it. You know, disruptive or incremental. You know, design thinking is not necessarily bound by the land of the feasible. You know, Netflix couldn't self-disrupt until there was enough bandwidth in the pipes to be able to send your movies to your house. But you know, maybe that wasn't quite feasible out of the door. But using design thinking and not bounding yourself to necessarily just the feasible and pushing the envelope is really important. But I think where the maturity of how design thinking is being used by large corporations and clients is now we are better at aligning it with those other things that those other processes that you're talking about. You know, having agile and design thinking can work really well together, because you know those user journeys and client experiences that you can design can then be extrapolated into your epics and into your scenarios, into tasks, and into something that can be, you know, coded and tested and put into your code base, you know, every sprint. You know, using the garage method to kind of rapidly pull something out. And then, you know, your DevOps stack to be able to have the ability to push those builds twice a day or whatever it is, so that you can test and iterate really, really quickly. What that means is we now not only have the actual applications and tools, but we have the people and process to be able to embrace the great outcomes you get from design thinking and actually apply them and get them out the door.
I think what I really love about design thinking, I think we all touched upon it, but just to kind of put it in the final words, is it brings the human component to the work we do. And at the end of the day, the interactions that we have and bringing that empathetic part of the design thinking is so important, because we can't overlook the human component. And I think that's one of the things about design thinking that really stands out. And I'm really feeling that today. So
That was a really great conversation. I'm so glad we have Nick and Dom in today's conversation, and very enriching on all levels. And I look forward to the next conversation where we're gonna continue talking about the design thinking subject, but we're gonna tackle it maybe from different perspective as well. And would love to have you in future conversations. Thank you so much.